The Fort Preble Preservation Committee will be holding a workday on Saturday, May 7th, and the public is invited to come and help protect and preserve the grounds and structures of the historic fort. Brian Knobloch talked with Maine military historian Ken Thompson about the fort and the cleanup.
So Ken, we're here at Fort Preble. Let's talk a little bit about the history first.
Well, this site was fortified as early as 1745 with a couple of guns during the French and Indian War. Then in the American Revolution, it had a more substantial little fort called the Battery at Spring Point, and later Fort Hancock had 7 or 8 guns. And in 1808, the federal government built 2 forts in the harbor, Fort Preble here at Spring Point, Fort Scammell across the water at House Island, and a third federal fort was Fort Sumner on Munjoy Hill, which had been built 14 years earlier. So they had kind of a little crossfire to protect from invaders. In 1845, they expanded the fort with earthen gun batteries north and west of the fort, connected to the main fort where we're standing. And then in 1863, they started the granite fort down at the water line, and they only got 1 tier high when it was abandoned because of modifications and improvements in rifled cannon fire. Originally, the new Fort Preble in 1863 was going to look like Fort Gorges out in the harbor, 3 tiers high. And then at the same time, they were building Fort Gorges and a new Fort Scammell out of granite. So the 3 forts together would mount about 300 guns in the final design, but only about 100 were ever mounted when they basically abandoned the program in the 1870s. And then the final modification or new fort was in the late 1890s when they built concrete gun batteries that were scattered around, like at Fort Williams, Fort Preble here, Fort Leavitt on Cushing Island, and Fort McKinley on Great Diamond Island. And the atomic bomb and long-range bombers, as well as advances in the range of naval guns, made these forts obsolete in the 1930s and 40s.
So they seem to have a sort of a history of trying to catch up, but then being overtaken by events and by technology. Is that correct?
Right. It's like today. By the time you design a military weapons system, be it a ship or air defenses, and then you go to Congress to get approval and get the money, and then building it, you're already 10 years behind, and there's something newer on the drawing board.
And what sort of role did Fort Preble play in South Portland's history?
Well, Fort Preble was the headquarters of the harbor defenses in Portland Harbor from 1808 to the early 1900s, when it was supplanted by Fort Williams. And it was an economic boom, as any major military installation is to the local community.
And let's talk about the cleanup that's going to be happening. It's part of an ongoing process here. What's going to be happening this Saturday?
Well, the Fort Preble Preservation Committee was founded a couple of years ago with a mix of executives from SMCC and the city of South Portland, as well as historians Joe Leisman and myself, to come up with a plan of action and implement it to clean up the historical area of Fort Preble. The fort encompasses probably 80 to 100 acres. We're concentrating on the portion right down at Spring Point, where there's a numerous amount of structures that are impacted negatively by bittersweet and bamboo and trees that are, the root systems are going down and allowing leaks in the roof of underground structures. So we're trying to cut back this area to what it looked like in 1950. In 1950, this whole area, you could count, there were no bushes, it was all grassed over, and you could count the number of trees on one hand.
And if people want to participate in the cleanup, where do they go for information? What do they bring? Where do they show up?
They bring good work shoes, gloves, long pants, and we should have water and refreshments here. Remember that there's no bathroom facilities. You have to go back to one of the college buildings. We're here from 9 to 1 on Saturday, and if you can come for part of that time or all of that time, we will have loppers and clippers, and there'll be a few designated people using chainsaws. So it's a lot of dragging limbs and bushes and put them in piles for the city to pick up.
That sounds like it's a good project for people to get involved in and help preserve the fort.
Yes, it is.